And here is a image of a blanket that is got a design in it, but you can't really tell what the design is when you're looking straight on at the fabric. But when you look at it at an angle, you can see that it's the Mona Lisa. So going around the swatch, we can see here the differences in the textures where we're going from stockinette to reverse stockinette. And it's this switching from back and forth that's creating this change in depth within the fabric.
Hey, it's Johnny, editor-in-chief here at the Yarnist, and this session is a limited time preview from our Big Black Friday sale. We are putting on offer a SuperDuper pass, which includes recordings from all 4 of our major events this year. There's more than 60 hours of knitting content and education, and it includes sessions from amazing designers like Ann Hansen, Kate Atherley, and Wooly Wormhead. And if you want to get on the early bird list, you're going to get a special discount, early access, because we're only going to limit this to 500 SuperDuper passes. And you're going to be entered to win a huge prize that we're going to announce Cyber Monday. So what's the big prize? You're going to get a SuperDuper pass for 2025 and 2026. And let me tell you, the events that we're putting on next year are going to be bigger and better than anything that we did in 2025. So if you want to get on our early bird list and get entered to win that huge prize, go over to yarnist.co/Black Friday. And when you get over there, I've got a special opportunity for you to get even more chances to win. So thanks so much for an amazing 2025. We can't wait for what's going to be happening in 2026. And let's get back to our limited time preview of our SuperDuper Pass right now.
Hey, we are back with our second session of day 3 of the Colorwork Knitting Weekend. Hope that you're having a good time and that you enjoyed our previous session. Right now, we are going to talk about shadow knitting or illusion knitting, which is a technique where you can hide images or messages inside of your knitting. And you do it through knitting textured stripes. So it's a relatively simple technique that has a lot of, let's say it has a particular application, but within that application, you can do lots of interesting things. So let's take a look at some examples of some shadow knitting real quick before we go into a tutorial on how to do it. So in shadow knitting, you'll see projects where basically you have stripes, and then when you view the project from an angle, it's going to show an image, right? Or you can use it to make messages and stuff like that. It just depends on what you're doing. Almost always this is going to be knit on some flat piece of fabric, maybe a scarf, usually some sort of blanket, and even you'll see it used as art pieces. They'll be knit up into big panels and done for art galleries, or I think even Ripley's Believe It or Not has bought a bunch of these from a company that makes a bunch of these patterns. I like this one in particular because you get a good idea of how the optical illusion can work within the fabric. But the key here is that when you're looking at the fabric from straight on, it is just stripes. And when you look at it at an angle, then the image shows. There's a great website, all on illusion knitting, called Woolly Thoughts. And here is a image of a blanket that is got a design in it, but you can't really tell what the design is when you're looking straight on at the fabric. But when you look at it at an angle, you can see that it's the Mona Lisa. And it can be viewed from either angle. You'll still be able to see the image. I wonder, does this play? Oh no, this just moves from one to one. So they have a bunch of these different designs that they've done using this, and they'll chart these patterns. There's a specific way to read these charts, and we will go into that right now. So I've got a demo that I prepared ahead of time for you, going through how this all works. Talk about shadow knitting. It's also called illusion knitting, and it is the process of knitting stripes using texture to create this type of fabric where when you change the angle that you look at it, you'll see a different image. So let's take a look at an example right now. So here we can see that we have this swatch, which mostly looks like pink and gray stripes. However, when we start to change the angle of the image, we can begin to see a picture forming. So you should be able to see a heart image there. And the sharper the angle, the more clear that picture looks. So going around the swatch, we can see here the differences in the textures where we're going from stockinette to reverse stockinette. And it's this switching from back and forth that's creating this change in depth within the fabric. And that's allowing the color to be blocked from one direction so that you mostly see pink instead of gray here. And you'll also see on the sides more gray instead of pink. That's where the illusion is coming from. Now, the process of knitting this is really simple. You're pretty much just following a chart. And this swatch here is based off of this pattern, Heart Illusion pattern by Louise Williams, which you can find on Ravelry for free. However, the way that it's explained in this pattern, I didn't love, because they use this abbreviated chart. And this abbreviated chart here skips over quite a bit of information, in my opinion. Now, do they tell you all of this stuff in the pattern? Yes. Is it intuitive? No. But basically what's happening is for each row in this chart, you're actually knitting 4 rows. And that's the important thing that you need to know. So you have the row that's missing because this is only the even rows in the chart. On the odd rows, you're knitting a knit stitch on all stitches. And then you're following the chart key on this one. And rather in this than show you when to knit and when to purl, they just tell you when you are doing one of these colors, when to do what, knit or purl. Technically, that's all fine. That all makes sense. But I don't think that it's the best way to start out. I rewrote a version of this chart. I got rid of the border in Chartminder, and it actually looks a lot more like this. So you can see here that we have these stitches that are going to create a ridge on the edge. Okay, this is where we're getting our reverse stockinette, or it's really like a garter ridge that's being made. And then we have a gap in the stitch. We can zoom in. So we have this gap in the stitch. And then you'll see that we reverse that on the next stripe. So we're going, and I colored these to make it a little bit easier to follow. So we know, okay, we're always knitting this stripe. And here we're knitting a stockinette stripe, okay? Knit on the front, purl on the back. And then we have a reverse garter stitch. So we have a knit on the front and then knit on the back, except for these stitches here. So this is like a garter stitch stripe.
and you follow that all the way up. So to get the actual image that we want, we have to work 4 rows really to create the gap in both colors that we want. And this was made a lot more clear to me when I was looking at this book, which is Shadow Knitting by Vivian Hoxbro, or I think that I'm saying that right. I don't know how to pronounce this O sound. And she outlines the way that you do these charts. Okay, so she likes to change the color of her chart symbols based on if it's in your main color or your contrasting color. That's not really that important. I found it a little bit confusing when going through some of her charts because she doesn't use consistent charts all the way through the book. She'll also throw in these other chart symbols from time to time. So let's see here, we have, she also has a heart pattern, which is this one. And here she has these sort of like triangular ridge stitches that she's using to indicate where you're going to see the texture. It's not a big deal. The thing is that all of this type of knitting is just following charts. There's nothing complicated to it. So I'm going to give you a quick demonstration, but basically all we're doing is knitting and purling, and that's it. So if you can learn to read these very simple charts where you're literally just knitting on the wrong side where the dots are, and then also basically wherever there's a symbol, you're just going to knit on the wrong side. Otherwise, you're knitting stockinette the entire time. It's that easy. This entire book is full of patterns that use that same concept, just applied in slightly different ways. There's not really much else to the technique. Unfortunately, this book is out of print and there is no ebook version of it that I could find. If you find it and you're really into this, you're mostly buying it for the different patterns that are included in here. They're pretty. There's a lot of garments and stuff that use these techniques, but there's not a lot to explore as far as how this technique works. Okay, so let's do a quick demo for you. Okay, in this example, I'm going to be knitting a version of this chart right here where we're basically making stripes. I just didn't do this full number of stitches. We're just doing 5 in each stripe. So we can see already that when you look at this head on, it mostly looks like horizontal stripes. You can see a tiny bit of deformation, but not much. However, when we turn this swatch to the side, you can start to see how the colors are more prominent here and here. So we get more like vertical stripes. Now, if this was a lot longer, then you would be able to see those a little bit more clearly. But let me show you how we do this. It's very straightforward. So first, you're always going to be knitting all of your stitches on the first row when you do your color change, and every row is going to be made up of 2 rows in the same color. Just if you were doing stripes, you would usually want to have an even number of rows, so that way when you swap your colors, then you can have it all carried up the same side. So I'm just going to knit all the stitches all the way across. Very easy.
So on the right side of the fabric, your first row of your color change is always going to be all knit stitches. Always. That's never going to change. Then we're going to turn the work around to the wrong side, and now we're going to start our pattern. So this pattern is stockinette garter stitch. Stockinette for 5 stitches, garter stitch. So to do stockinette, we're going to keep the pattern. We got to do 5 stitches that are purled. Okay, so we've got 5 purl stitches, and then we're going to do 5 knit stitches. And this is going to create the garter texture in the fabric. That gives it that elevated bump. Okay, so we have 5 and 5, then we're going to switch back. So we're going to do 5 purls. And then 5 knits. Okay. Just like that. Okay, so now we're going to switch our colors. We can see we have our ridges here and our recesses here. Now we're just going to do the opposite of that. So we're going to carry this yarn up. We're going to knit all of the stitches across the row. And pretty much all shadow knitting, illusion knitting is just following those charts where you need to know where to do your knits and where to do your purls. And if you just follow the chart, the pattern should come out exactly the way as intended. It's incredibly simple. It's only slightly more difficult than knitting regular stripes. Okay, so now we're going to do the opposite of what we did on the other one. So here we're going to start by knitting 5. And then we're going to purl 5 for the stockinette portion. Okay, 5 and 5, then we'll do 5 knits. And 5 purls. And that's it. We'll just keep doing that over and over again to create this vertical stripe texture. But essentially, by doing these sections that are recessed, when you look at them at an angle, they're going to show mostly one color versus the other. So it's called an illusion or illusion knitting because at the right angle, our eyes get tricked. Even though these stripes here, these ridges, are further down, they're offset one row than these ridges, we perceive them as if they're right next to each other just because of the way that our brains work. So there we go. That's how you do it. That is everything that you need to know in order to do illusion knitting. The most complicated part of this is if you want to create your own charts, then you need to think in 3 dimensions, how do you want to make that work? But the actual knitting is pretty simple. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that tutorial on shadow or illusion knitting. There's a couple questions in the chat that we're going to answer right now. Let's see. First is from Kape. Isn't illusion knitting also made with only one color? I don't think it would work if you use only one color. You need that contrast in order to be able to see the difference in the images. So everything that I've seen suggests that you have some high contrast between the yarn colors. There are some projects where they use colors that are a little bit closer together, but that's more the exception than the rule. Can you use more than just two colors? Yeah, for sure you can. There are some cool projects that have made like some art pieces that use the effect but with multiple different colors. And I've seen this done with the technique that we talked about where you have a solid yarn and also a color changing yarn as one of them. As long as you have that contrast for something for your eye to latch onto and be able to see the contrast, it should work just fine. And A said that there is an ebook version at the local library. There are some libraries that have an ebook version of this, but there was never a ebook version that was made publicly available to buy. I have seen some online libraries that have the ability for you to check out the book, but you can't buy the book anywhere. Not that I've found. Lisa says, did you just knit across the row in row 3? Yeah, so you're going to, each row has a front pass, a forward pass, and a back pass. And so you're going to always work across the one row using knits. Mary asks, where can I get the shadow heart pattern? The one that I used in there is based off of one that's on Ravelry that's for free. I don't remember the name of it, but if you just do a search for illusion knit heart, it will be the most popular one on there. They have some instructions. Again, I found them a little bit challenging to wrap my head around to begin with, but if you take some time, and there's some other tutorials online that can help with that as well. But at the end of the day, the charts, once you figure out how the chart is written and what you need to do, it's pretty straightforward. How hard is it to create your own design in this method? I think that if you're inclined to charting things out, it's more a matter of you can chart it, but most of the charts, they remove a line from the chart, so you're only knitting like the even rows or something of the pattern. Then that's to make this chart smaller and more manageable, and then you see the image. It's really more, do you have the patience to chart out a pixelated design and then format that in the shadow knitting style of a chart? So there's some resources on that Woolly knitting website. They talk about illusion knitting. They have a whole section about how the charts work, how to make your own charts and stuff like that. You can find a copy of the book online. I bought mine used. Like I said, it's out of print, but you can usually get a used copy of the book somewhere. All right, folks, we are going to take another quick break here, and we will be back